Good evening, everyone. Uh, you are most welcome to this 39th issue of our Environmental and Occupational Health DigiConnect webinar. So we are very grateful to Dr. Abha Agarwal to join this webinar today. Dr. Abha Agarwal, her topic will be the way forward in 2021 with COVID-19 and COVID vaccination and the post-COVID syndrome. Dr. Abha is Chief Medical Officer at Norwegian American Hospital, Chicago, USA. She has joined live from Chicago. And may I request our President, Dr. Gajendra Kumar sir, to give the welcome address.
Good evening, friends. Again, as usual, as on every Saturday we meet. This time again we are meeting for a very important topic about COVID scenario and management in the 2021. And our esteemed speaker is Dr. Abha Agarwal from States. So I warmly welcome all my participants and our guest speaker. Now I hand over with these few words to Dr. Sandeep to proceed ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Gajendra Kumar sir. Sir, thank you very much for your welcome address. And for information to Dr. Abha Agarwal, Dr. Abha, Madam, we are all from Indian Association of Occupational Health, and we are from IUS Delhi branch, and rest of the people, they have joined from different branches of India, which are spread across India, and all our senior past presidents, senior doctors, they have joined the webinar to hear you about the way forward in 2021, how we should be able to go about with this COVID scenario. Because now COVID vaccination and post-COVID syndrome, they will be the main challenges in the coming year. And as we are getting a lot of exciting news about the COVID-19 vaccine, and we are all stuck at this time with this current COVID-19 situation, and vaccines will definitely help us to get out of the situation. But the COVID vaccination is a Herculean task. And we as industrial doctors, as occupational health physicians, and as public health physicians, it is our responsibility to spread the right, correct information about the vaccination, about the post-COVID syndrome, about the sequelae of the post-COVID syndrome, so that we can effectively manage our workforce in our respective industries, wherever we are working. We have already started global vaccination across the world. China, Russia, UK, US, Bahrain, many other countries now, they have started vaccination, and Government of India is also planning to start the vaccination with more than 1 crore healthcare workers, frontline workers, about 2 crores and 27 people with 50 years and above, and people with comorbidities less than 50 years. So, and our Zero survey, it has also told us that it has indicated that about 25 to 30% of our Indian population, they have already been exposed to COVID. So this will amount to about 30 crore of the people who have been exposed already to COVID. So this will roughly amount to about 60 to 65 crore people who have some sort of immunity for the COVID, and this is going to be the 2021 plan for the Government of India. And post-COVID syndrome, as we are all coming across with, or the long haulers, they will be the major problem in the coming years. And you will be the best person to tell us something about this vaccination, how it is going about across the globe, especially in the US, and something about the COVID long haulers and the symptoms and how to manage them. And now for the introduction of Dr. Abha Agarwal to all the participants. Dr. Abha Agarwal is Chief Medical Officer of the Norwegian American Hospital, Chicago, USA. And Dr. Abha Agarwal is an alumna of the Harvard and Yale University, a Fulbright scholar and author of several books on patient safety and health information technology. She has served in numerous leadership roles in the US and is currently appointed as the Chief Medical Officer at Norwegian American Hospital, Chicago. She served as Chief Medical Officer at New York and Health and Hospitals Corporation. King County Hospital is 700-bed academic teaching center in New York. And she has been given the recognition for her role as a rising healthcare leader. She was invited to the White House to meet President Obama's health and economic policy advisor and provide testimony at the US Senate. And in 2019, she received a special invitation for the 4th Global Health Minister Summit on Patient Safety in Saudi Arabia in 2019 to speak to the health ministers of 63 countries. And she is also founder of A4 Clinics, which is spread across India, especially in 4 major cities like Bhopal, Delhi, etc. And a positive social impact venture, which is a launch of the chain of clinics with the aim to reduce the burden of unnecessary disabilities in India through advanced robotic and technology. It was recognized that at the Global Entrepreneurship Summit 2017, which was inaugurated by our Honorable Prime Minister and the advisor to the US President, which was held in Hyderabad. And she has also been a teaching faculty at Harvard Medical School at Norwegian University, and she has received her post-graduation in medicine at State University of New York and fellowship in medical informatics at Yale School of Medicine. She obtained her MBBS from SN Medical College, Agra, India, and she's a gold medalist in professional examination. And there are numerous accolades with some notable, which are including Top 20 Global Women of Excellence, US Congress, Chicago, Make in India Award by Bharat Nirman Foundation, Women of the Year Award, Congress Men, Danny Davis, Chicago, and 130 Women Hospital and Health System Leaders to Know, National List by Becker's Hospital Review, 3 years in a row in US, and she is a Fulbright Scholar 2011 and Healthcare Leadership Award by American College of Healthcare Executives. So Dr. Abha Agarwal, with your so much expertise and exposure, we all industrial physician, occupational health physicians and public health physicians, our association people, our senior leaders, they would like to understand about the vaccination and the post-COVID syndrome. If they have any queries, that will be asked after the in the Q&A session. So Dr. Abha, welcome. I welcome you, and the floor is yours. You can share your screen and you can start your address now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Sandeep. And thank you everyone for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join me this evening. First of all, let me just tell you, I know Dr. Sandeep because we are both alumni of SN Medical College. So that's my connection here, if you will. And secondly, frankly, I'm here to have a conversation. So we'll make it interactive. Feel free to do it in the Zoom fashion, whichever way we can with the permission from the moderator. This is a very new topic. I really claim no expertise, maybe willing, hoping to share some experience rather, and as much here to learn from the group, as much to share my experience. So we'll keep it this way, a little bit informal, a little bit of exchange of information, and hoping that I will learn as much, and I'm sure actually I will learn as much as I'll be able to. With that, I will start with my slides. Yes, Dr. Sandeep?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So as Dr. Sandeep mentioned, I wanted to talk about two things: COVID-19 vaccination as well as post-COVID syndrome, post-acute COVID-19 syndrome. That's an emerging entity that's coming up and being defined now. First of all, I just wanted to bring you some season's greetings and a Happy New Year from the lighting on Michigan Avenue. It's frigid and cold this morning, turning out to be about -10. And so it's good to be home in the morning. Start with the vaccine first. We are calling it, I'm calling it a vial of hope. And just to get the lay of the land right, Right now, we have two vaccines that are under FDA's emergency use authorization only. As you all know, it's the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine. We also know there are a whole bunch of vaccines that are, candidate vaccines.
Abha, you have to share your screen. Your screen is not shared.
Oh boy, I thought, okay, thank you for telling me. There you are. Is it okay now?
It's okay now.
Okay,
Uh,
well,
you can
I
put
will
it
start
a bit
my
more.
slide quickly. This is my greetings to you from Chicago. This was my intro slide, and we were here. So calling it a vial of hope, these are the two vaccines. Pfizer is, both of them are under EUA, emergency use authorization. That means we also know that we don't have long-term data about them, and I'll share a little bit about the trial data on the Pfizer vaccine. Pfizer is out. Last week, we started to vaccinate last Tuesday in the city of Chicago. So it's been about 10 days now. Moderna received all the approvals and is on the way to the hospitals this coming week. So I thought let's do a Pfizer Moderna comparison as to where we are with these two vaccines. Okay. For the Pfizer vaccine, I mean, I am going in a manner, I know we have very senior physicians here. Most people are generally aware of what's going on with the vaccines. So I'm not doing too much ado about that. I will talk a little bit about the Pfizer procurement and logistics because Dr. Sandeep mentioned that. So sort of to cut to the chase, Pfizer vaccine, the target population is 16 and older, and Moderna, the vaccine is 18 and older. And the reason is pretty simple. When they did the clinical trials, they did not have any people under the age of 16. And just to give a little bit more sort of flavor to it, when FDA advisory committee voted on it, there were 4 people who voted against the Pfizer vaccine. 16 voted in favor, 4 against, and against because they said there are no trials in the 16 and under. So that's a pretty important issue. Efficacy, both of them have excellent efficacy, 95% and 94.1%. Preventing symptomatic COVID infection 7 days after the second dose, and same across all age and ethnic groups after 16 and older for the Pfizer vaccine. Moderna vaccine, pretty good, also preventing symptomatic COVID infection. A little bit longer for the immunity to kick in, 14 days after the second dose. And they were slightly less efficacious in under 65 years age. We don't know what the implication is going to be. Right now, it doesn't seem like, based on the CDC guidelines, that Moderna will not be given, but just for us to be aware. I think very important for us to know, we don't know if can they prevent asymptomatic infection? That has not been studied in the trials. And B, can vaccinated people transmit infection if they have no symptoms? What does this translate into? It translates into, we cannot say with certainty whether these people will curb the community transmission of the virus. That's an important point, but let's put it this way. The Pfizer booster dose is given 3 weeks later, 21 days. Moderna, the booster dose is 28 days. Side effects, actually this is an extremely good side effect profile, very similar. And largely the side effects are what's being called the reactogenic category or vaccinogenic category, which is almost any vaccine can be expected to have this type of side effect. Especially the influenza vaccination happens every year in US around this time from September to March. And these are very similar side effects to that. Pain at the injection site, fatigue, muscle pain. Some people have had fever. Also, there are reports of allergic reaction anaphylaxis. There was the first one that came from the UK. And there were a few, especially in Alaska, that have been reported. Now we are understanding that there is the glycol particle in the Pfizer vaccine, all from Pfizer, that probably is responsible for the allergic reaction. There have been a handful of anaphylaxis, and I will share with you our experience. Sorry. Just another thing on the side effect. The side effects are expected to be stronger after the booster dose, as we will all expect as scientists. And also they are more likely to be in the younger age group, again indicating that these are probably immunogenic, reactogenic reactions and not a true adverse event to the vaccine. One other point in that, we all know that these data points are only a few weeks after the booster dose. This has been, I would say, going to be perhaps the biggest experiment in somewhere where millions and millions of people will get the vaccine without having the long-term data. And I will show you a little bit about our experience there. None of the trials of either Pfizer or Moderna included pregnant women or lactating women. So the recommendation presently is, if both this, CDC and the guidance group in US is called ACIP, Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. They issue the guidelines for practically all vaccinations in US. They have said it's okay, pregnant and lactating women can take it because it's neither an inactive virus or live attenuated virus. There is no risk of infection. And also the American College of OBGYN has said you should take it. And discuss with your physician. I can tell you in my own hospital, a couple of pregnant employees have taken it and quite a few have refused. So this is still to be tested and tried as to how that's going to happen. Storage and logistics. As we all know, the Pfizer vaccine is notorious about storage. It ships at -80 to -90. And at that temperature, it's good for about 5 months or so. And then you put it in the refrigerator, a standard refrigerator, where it's good for 5 days or so. Moderna is easier. It ships at -4, and refrigerated one is good for 30 days. So Dr. Sandeep, you had mentioned a little bit about the procurement and logistics. The way it worked the last week, and we can come, what's the date then? On Friday evening, FDA approved it. Saturday morning, CDC, and this was 2 weeks ago, CDC and ACIP reviewed and issued their guidelines. The trucks and all were pretty much ready. The airplanes and the logistic trucks were ready. And they started to get the vaccines out. And as I said, Tuesday, we were able to start the first vaccinations in Chicago. That's about 10 days, 10, 11 days from before today. The procurement, entire procurement is being done by the federal government, which is unusual in US, but the procurement is through the federal government, and the distribution is entirely through the state departments of health. So as a hospital, it's not like I can go and order some vaccine from Pfizer and get it. The distribution is all through that, or city departments of health. So for example, in Chicago, we got all our vaccine through the City Department of Health. Very securely, it's the Chicago Police Department that delivers the vaccine to us, just so you know. They come in their own secure trucks and they bring the case to us. So it is being overseen. It's the military's logistics department that is carrying out all the logistics right from the beginning. So I think just if I can give you a little bit, we have procured the ultra cold freezer 4 weeks ago at our own hospital. And of course, we had the refrigerators for everything else, including other vaccines. So I know it's going to be a nightmare, possibly, and challenges, but so far it's going quite well. I can tell you again from my vantage point. Lastly, durability of protection is unknown for both these vaccines. Is it going to be an annual thing like the influenza? We don't even know how the variant strain is going to play out, and there's the one that's being reported in UK. Is it going to require a booster after 5 years? Is the immunity going to wane after 6 months? We don't know. So there are still quite a few unknowns, but especially this one is, we will all find out as the vaccination around the world goes on. So I will continue. If there is any questions, you can raise hands to the moderator. So this is the data on the Pfizer vaccine I'm going to focus on because that's what I have most experience with. Let me just get it out of here. Published in the New England Journal of Medicine. And I put a copy of the abstract here and the key points to the right side of your screen. As I mentioned, the participants were 16 years or older. The greater got erased somehow. It's a large scale trial, 43,545 participants that were randomized, almost 21 plus in the Pfizer vaccine cohort, 21 plus in the placebo. And they looked at these parameters, cases of COVID-19 with onset at least 7 days after the second dose. That's when they think the protection kicks in. About 8 in the vaccine group and 162 in the placebo group. And that leads us to the 95% effectiveness in preventing COVID-19 at the 95% credible interval. They found similar efficacy in subgroups defined by age, sex, race, ethnicity, baseline BMI, and the presence of coexisting conditions. No differentiation in the efficacy. In terms of the safety, 10 cases of severe COVID-19 with onset after the first dose, 9 of them were in placebo and 1 in the vaccine group. So this is these are the key pointers for you from the abstract. If you would like, Dr. Sandeep, I'll be happy to share the slide deck so folks can get the references. Let me see if there are any chat. No.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I will continue. So we all know it's an mRNA vaccine, and there has been a lot of discussion, at least this side of the world, about there is a microchip. They're going to be injecting a GPS tracker so that the government can do surveillance of every human being. It's going to alter my DNA. It's the government's nefarious plan. It's Bill Gates' plan to dominate the world. It's China going to track all of us. So I have done this quite a lot for my own group in the hospital, how this vaccine works. I have the side effects after dose for normal people. I will actually share with you our actual experience of 300 plus doses. Okay, so very, very quick primer. Everybody is a senior physician. Just to review, this is the coronavirus. These are the spikes, the famous spikes. And this little red thing is the spike protein gene. That's what we are targeting in the vaccine. Okay. So we take the mRNA that encodes the spike protein gene. This is the mRNA. And we enclose it in the lipid nanoparticles. Otherwise, the body tissue enzymes are going to destroy it in a moment. So that's, now the mRNA is the vaccine. It goes into the vaccinated cell. You have the mRNA being translated into little spiky things. And those little spiky things then come together, they make spike. And the spike starts to express on the surface of the vaccinated human cell by translating mRNA into a spike protein. The vaccinated cell, which is this little guy, which is getting destroyed now, gets destroyed. The spike gets presented to the antigen presenting cell, which activates the helper T cell, which is this guy. Oh. Okay. Now the helper T cell starts to activate the helper T cell starts to activate the antibody producing B cell, and you get this spike, anti-spike antibodies. And these are all circulating antibodies now, right? And again, now you get a new coronavirus inside you. This is the coronavirus, virus with the spike, and you got enough antibodies to fight it. It's pretty simple. Now, what I tell a lot of people, which we don't need to do in this group, because again, these are all, you guys are pretty senior doctors. This mRNA never enters the DNA of the cell. So there is no really mRNA altering the DNA material of the human who is receiving the vaccine. You know, somebody asked me the other day, we were doing a town hall at the hospital. Well, HIV is an RNA virus, and the body has a reverse transcriptase and it gets integrated into the DNA. I mean, there is no indication. This is not RNA, first of all, this is mRNA. And there is no indication whatsoever that the mRNA can get inside the human cell that's being vaccinated. So that's what we know so far. But like I said in the very beginning, I'm sort of sharing with you what we know so far. Is it possible some of this will change? I think it's actually rather likely, but anyway, we are going by what we know so far. Okay, this is the national rollout plan in US. We are presently in phase 1A. They have phase 1A, we got phase 1B and phase 1C. This is what we are planning right now. Phase 2 is still not out there. We are in phase 1A presently nationally, which is to target healthcare workers and long-term facility residents because they are elderly, they are vulnerable, and a very high risk of infection. Phase 1B is going to be more than 75 years, non-healthcare frontline essential workers. Phase 1C, 65 to 74, 16 to 64 with high-risk medical conditions, and then the remaining essential workers. So this is the rollout plan that we have so far. How many people in each group? Dr. Sandeep, you were giving a summary in the very beginning. This is what we are looking at, number in millions. Number 1A, healthcare personnel, 21 million, long-term facility residents, 3 millions. And then 1B, frontline essential workers, 30, persons aged 75 or more, 21, 65 to 74, 32, everybody else. But look at this group, it will strike you. Persons ages 16 to 64 with high-risk medical conditions, 110 million people. Total population being about 330. A third of the population. And essential workers not planned 57, and you get this idea. Okay, coming home. So let's bring the vaccine home now. This is what we know about it. Again, if you have any questions, please speak up. Otherwise, I will continue. Yes? Okay. So the vaccine came to Chicago on Monday. Tuesday, we had a major press conference with the mayor of the city. I was very fortunate. I gave one of the first vaccinations. This person is an ER nurse. This is me. We had a press conference. This is the mayor of of Chicago City. And it was truly a lot of excitement. You know, the whole big media production issue took place. By the way, this nurse I followed up personally because I felt this was my responsibility. She just had soreness in the arm and nothing else. So just so you know, she's doing fine. She only asked me, doctor, when was the last time you actually gave an injection? I said many years ago, but don't worry, I can do it. And it's deltoid intramuscular in case you are wondering. Okay, so just a little bit, these are the vials we get. The diluent is just 0.9% sodium chloride, normal saline. There's no preservative. These are multi-dose vials, 5 doses. Per vial dose is this much. We know the indications. You need 2-dose series separated by 21 days. Both doses must be the same vaccine. You can't give Pfizer and then do Moderna. And it's intramuscular injection in the deltoid muscle. I just want to give you, people started to report that they are being able to squeeze out 6 doses out of the vial, or some people even were able to get 7th dose. And the FDA just a couple of days ago approved that you can, if you have the availability, can squeeze the 6th dose out. For us, about a third of the vials gave us the 6th dose. So just so you know. This is the ultra cold freezer. Actually, I hadn't taken a temperature, so I lifted this from the web. This is our own hospital. As you can see, this is my personal picture. So you put the vaccine, it's good for 5 days. Let's say I know I have 100 people scheduled for today. I will take the 20 vials out of this, put it in the refrigerator first thing in the morning. It goes in the employee health. And then 2 to 3 hours thaws, and then you can start to put it. Once you put the diluent, you have a few hours to give the vaccine, and that's about it. when we obviously can't afford to discard. This vaccine vial is so precious these days that we are making sure nothing is wasted at all. Some practical considerations how we are rolling it out. So a city of Chicago created its own tiers, right? So I'll give you an example. We got only 150 doses on first shipment. And I'm like, how am I going to do these 150 doses? Now we have over 1,000 more, but so they created tiers. Tier 1, which is useful for you to know, was healthcare professionals who are routinely involved in taking care of COVID-19 or PUI patients and are involved in aerosol generating procedures. And tier 2 was the same, who instead of routinely, who may, which is pretty much the same. So aerosol generating procedure became our main thing. So that means anesthesiologists, respiratory therapists, ER nurses, ER physicians, ICU nurses, ICU physicians, trauma guys. They became our main first tier people. And then even among the healthcare professionals, there was, in other words, tiering and gradation. But now we have enough vaccine, we have just opened it up to everyone. So when we were doing that, we are now saying, don't send all ER nurses today, because what if they all get side effect or even sore arm, and then you're gonna have nobody to work with. So we are making sure that the department managers don't send more than 25% or 30% of the staff for smaller departments in one day. We prefer to vaccinate prior to the day off. So we vaccinated a whole lot of people on Thursday. We vaccinate on Saturdays because a lot of people have Sundays off. So that way people have a time, and we have to keep running the business of the hospital. I already mentioned second dose must be of the same vaccine. A grace period of 3 to 4 days is okay in case instead of 21 days you extend it. The problem is right now there is no recommendation to restart the series. So if somebody has lapsed more than 15 days, 3 weeks, they say just give the next dose ASAP. We have no guidance that we need to restart the series. So we are keeping very tight tab on every single individual in our hospital. At least 2-week interval between other vaccines. So you got the flu shot, you got to wait 2 weeks. Side effects are more after the second dose. Wait 90 days after acute COVID-19, okay? And wait 90 days after convalescent plasma or monoclonal antibodies. Observe 15 minutes for everyone. So everyone has to wait for 15 minutes and 30 minutes for people with history of allergies. Any severe allergies, absolute contraindication, will not give the vaccine. Even if you have environmental allergies that are of the severe variety, we will not give you the vaccine because anaphylaxis has been reported, not by us, but in general. And you have to have anaphylaxis kits ready in the area. And again, CDC keeps and ACIP are issuing these guidelines every day. So I have sort of summarized, and this is exactly what we are doing. We have created a COVID vaccination station in our employee health suite, basically. Okay, a few other things. This is the VSafe app by CDC. So we ask everybody, this is on their personal phones, please download the VSafe app. Every day you report your symptoms. So that way we will have very large scale safety and symptom database about the whole country. And then we, as a hospital, are mandated to report any adverse events on the vaccine adverse event reporting system, which is not only for COVID, for any vaccine that we give in our hospital. I think, let's say we have anything. What about persons with history of asthma? So Dr. Rajiv, persons with history of asthma can receive this vaccine. If they have severe allergic asthma, that will fall into the allergic variant, then we wouldn't give. But if you just have asthma, you can give the vaccine. Any allergic reaction in your hospital, I will come to that. I have a slide on that. Do you have experience sharing Moderna? We don't have yet. So Moderna is what I know from the literature, and let's go back to my hospital's experience. Okay, there you are. So this is our experience so far. Our hospital, City of Chicago, started on the 15th, the mayor's conference, all the big deal. Then we get the vaccine on 17th. We first got only 195 doses. And then we got another thousands of dosages now, so we don't have a problem. It was Pfizer vaccine. We have administered 300 doses so far, all our first doses. Interestingly, very significant refusal rate among non-physicians, especially nurses. Physicians, most people are sure, here is my arm, give me the vaccine. When can I get it? When can I get it? Nurses, a lot of nurses. And otherwise, my secretary, executive assistant, not taking the vaccine. No matter what I tell her, I don't want the vaccine. I'm going to wait it out. So refusal rate is substantial, at least in our own hospital. And this is also national experience. Very interestingly, EVS are the housekeeping people, environmental services, almost no refusal among EVS. We are learning things that are very interesting. So they are all like, sure, give it to us. They are relatively speaking less educated people. Nurses and junior senior nurses are perhaps the most reticent ones. In our hospital, out of this, 2 people had high fever. I'm talking about 102, 103 for about 24 to 36 hours, resolved within 24 to 36 hours. Many, about 70%, have reported soreness on the injection site. So I have a sore arm, many people are saying. Others are reporting fatigue, muscle ache. They all resolved in 24 hours. We have had no severe or allergic reactions. I will share with you one quote. I just met with our chief of cardiology. We ran into the hallway. He was one of our first vaccine recipients. So I asked him, hey, how is it going? And this is what he said. He said, Abha, this is not like your flu shot that you don't even feel. This is the vaccine that you feel in your body. So apparently, I haven't taken the vaccine yet. Apparently, there is, and he is not younger, he's on the older side. I mean, 60 years plus. So the vaccine has significant immunogenic reaction or reactogenicity inside the body, I think. The fever was both in the younger people under 40. We are attributing all of this to the vaccine is kicking in, immunogenic reaction is kicking in. As I said, I mean, scientifically speaking, I just take that all with a pinch of salt and I hope there is nothing more to it. There are 5 different strains of corona. Is the vaccine going to tackle all 5? Report from Australia about HIV positivity. What exactly a fake news? So Dr. Sudama, so right now we don't know. This is a question that's being asked across the country, across the world, especially with the UK and South Africa variant. The answer that we are getting from everybody is that we are not expecting, what they are saying is this, the variation is not in the spike protein and the antibodies that are being created against the spike protein. I personally am not so certain quite yet. I am worried about this piece, that all of this effort, is this still going to hold as the new variants emerge? And like the influenza, we have to create a new vaccine every year. Is this how the COVID-19 will end up being, having to create and give a new vaccine every year? So the, expert guidance is what it is, but I personally have some reservations about it. Report from Australia about HIV, I haven't actually read it. I don't know. It might have been a fake news. It didn't make it to my WhatsApp. I don't have good enough circle of WhatsApp people yet, I guess, so I can't speak to that. Okay. So let's move on from vaccine to the post-acute COVID syndrome. Anything on the vaccination before I move on?
Dr. Abha, you have already told us the side effects of the vaccine, and they are initially after the first dose, mainly the pain at the injection site will be there. And the most common symptoms, other symptoms, they are more prominent after the second dose. So
that's what they're saying. But we have had people reporting, even because we have done no second doses yet. They're all first doses only, because 21 days haven't elapsed. But as I said, people are reporting, I was tired, I didn't feel good for a day, I didn't want to get up. Are these psychogenic? Are these real? I mean, they seem real to me.
And as you have told that vaccine, the people who have already been infected with COVID-19, they can take vaccination after 90 days. So the people who have sufficient IgG levels, their IgG levels are high. Do they still need to take vaccination?
Right. So right now, and the guidance is very clear. They are not going by the IgG antibody, either the presence or absence of it, or even the titers of it. And I will share with you my personal story. I actually had COVID and I'm positive IgG, and I don't know what to do about that. A little bit more coming up. But the bottom line, right now, there is no guidance that you should check antibodies level either in the COVID recovery people or even general community. I mean, why not just do IgG antibodies first, and then if you are not positive, prioritize those people? I mean, we could have done that, but the scientific community very strongly felt that the presence of IgG after a naturally acquired infection is not clearly protective. What are they basing it on? We don't know. I have one article that I will share with you that just came out a couple of days ago in the New England Journal of Medicine. The second thing also is there is no requirement for us to do a COVID test before giving the vaccine. Because one can argue, what if you are in the asymptomatic phase of the infection? You have no symptoms, you already have COVID inside you. If we give you the vaccine, is it gonna be bad? Again, there is no guidance for us to do a COVID-19 like antigen test or a rapid PCR before giving the vaccine, because they are saying that if you are asymptomatic, even if per chance you have COVID, then the vaccine you should still take and there's no downside to it. Again, I will say this to you, I mean, at a personal level, I wouldn't perhaps say it in the hospital's town hall because I am wearing a different hat and I have a different responsibility. I pause and think about reading all of this. I mean, on what basis are we saying this? We don't have strong enough evidence. And some of these guidelines and recommendations are being published as we learn. So we gotta keep our mind open and keep our judgment open on these things. Let me see, we have, when you are saying allergy, drug allergies, penicillin, yes. So significant penicillin allergy is also a contraindication, Dr. Sudharma. And are you asymptomatic COVID positive? No, I was symptomatic. I'll share with you my pictures too. I kept that for the end. Okay. Yes.
Dr. Abha, are there any studies that immunocompromised people, they will have delayed response?
Yeah. So a lot of thought about immunocompromised people. Again, we don't know. They haven't given us the stratified data on immunocompromised people. The recommendation is that they can take it. I personally, I'll tell you our radiology manager who is about 65 years old or 70, breast cancer, chemo recipient, and also a good friend of mine for many years now. She got it. She's doing okay. So just, it's an N of 1, so that doesn't mean anything, but their recommendation is to give it to immunocompromised people. Again, we are not, remember, even in the studies, the trial data that I just shared with you about the Pfizer vaccine, they did not share the antibody level. They did not measure the antibody level. The outcome measures were the presence of infection or severe COVID. They did not measure the antibody levels after the vaccination as a surrogate marker of whether your body has protection. So we are going to learn a lot about the role of IgG and the protection it offers. And I also think the same thing. Remember the graphic I told you, shared with you, if everything is about having antibodies, then why not do IgG? Anyway, that's where they said we are learning more about that. Okay.
I got one question.
Yes, sir.
See, beside this, these two vaccines, there are other vaccines also being used. One is Russian Sputnik 5 vaccine, another is Chinese vaccine. So can you give some insight into these two other vaccines which are already there, and one more Oxford University vaccine, which is likely to be launched very soon?
Right. So, I mean, I don't have the data on the Sputnik and the Chinese vaccine, and that exactly is my problem. From what I know, I mean, I personally haven't studied, but the Russian vaccine, maybe I have done some literature search, and I may be wrong. I will be happy to learn otherwise, that there is no publicly peer-reviewed published data on the Russian or the Chinese vaccine. Is that fair to say? Or am I missing something?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Right. So then I don't know. I mean, personally, even with the publicly reported shared data and a reasonable amount of governance of data, we have some skepticism and we are learning a lot. I don't know how we can give vaccines to anyone. I wouldn't be able to, as a doctor, as a person of science, go to my staff, go to my family and say, take this vaccine just because the president of US says so. I will tell you one other thing, Dr. Gajendra, an interesting news story. There was a community town hall and people were saying, when will you take the vaccine? It was to address the resistance to vaccination. They said if President Trump is not too respected anyway in many communities, even if President Obama came and told us to take the vaccine, we wouldn't. But if Dr. Fauci came and said, take the vaccine, we will. And this was on the news. And what we are saying is people are understanding to respect, at least this is the situation in US in this part of the country. People are more interested in respecting the science and not just what the politicians say. And I would not go to put my credibility online and if I didn't have the data to share, basically. So now the Oxford one, from what I understand, that's the Oxford AstraZeneca. You know the whole story about the half dose, the trial said you gave the first dose. When you give the second dose, when the second dose was given in half the dose, it was more effective. When you gave the full dose, it was less effective. So that didn't make any sense, right? So people started to question the integrity of the data. So they are coming back with more data, more analysis, and then perhaps that will be approved soon. I think J&J has another candidate vaccine. Perhaps that's going to be one dose. But again, I'm just going by what I think I have good published data. Besides that, and it's all, a lot of hearsay, and I don't think we would be too well served. I understand completely. Now, this is the picture in the US. I mean, what happens, let's say, back home in India, but I'm here to learn that from you. Because I know I read as much, but you perhaps all are in a better position to understand what's going on in reality on the ground. Okay, so very quickly, I think these were post-acute COVID syndrome.
Dr. Abha, there is a question by Dr. Rajgopal. He has raised his hand, and Dr. Rajgopal, to introduce, he is our past president, and he is also vice president of Unilever Global Health. Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't see the raised hand. Go ahead, sir.
Hi. This is just an aside to this interesting conversation which we are having on vaccination, because I heard something about the Russian Sputnik vaccination, and you said that there's a veil of secrecy around it and not much of published literature. The story which I hear, Abha, is that there was a research center where this is being manufactured. There were 5 cases of people who died. So they set up an audit committee to look at it. The auditor went inside and he was told that 4 people died because of side effect. What about the 5th one? He says he died because of a head injury. And how did the head injury happen? So he said, because he refused to take the vaccine.
I think this is the best story, exactly. So
I thought, right. I couldn't resist telling it here.
No, this is perfect, exactly. So that I need to say no more, but this is great. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Then, Dr. Abha, one more last query regarding vaccine. The new mutated novel coronavirus, now it has been reported from UK and South Africa. How will it affect the vaccination? Will the vaccination be effective after that? Yeah.
We don't know. I mean, this is the talk of the town. There's a lot of, I go on webinars and conversations with CDC, with the IDPH as much as possible. I mean, remember I said at the very beginning, we are sharing amongst each other what we know so far.
Right.
But everything I am saying in the back of my mind, even as I'm saying it, especially among colleagues, and I'm not in a town hall where my role is to talk to nurses and housekeepers and all of that, in a more leadership role, especially among physicians and colleagues and scientists, I would take everything we are saying with a pinch of salt, because it's all so new. Now, they are saying the vaccine will be effective. I don't know. 3 months later, it might just change. We know so little about the new variant that we can't say whether it's going to be effective. I am skeptical on that one, to be honest, more skeptical than on many other points. I am okay in saying the vaccine is safe. I'm okay. Well, I'm very okay in saying the vaccine. These are my totally editorial comments, more from my intuition, not based on data. I'm very okay in saying the vaccine is effective, new variant notwithstanding. I'm okay in saying the short term, the vaccine is safe, and probably okay long term. New variant, I am not okay yet.
Right.
Okay.
So,
So
now-
post-acute COVID-19, this is what the system was up until this time, but let me move on actually, because NICE just released the guidelines. Let's go to those directly. Okay. These guidelines came out on the 18th of December. Perhaps many of you already know. These are UK guidelines. And the CDC hasn't released actually similar guidelines. So the past slides were of CDC. There is a lot of overlap, but NICE in UK has actually said, they have created definition. These are very good actually, I would say. Acute COVID-19, signs and symptoms of COVID-19 for up to 4 weeks. Ongoing symptomatic COVID-19, signs and symptoms of COVID-19 from 4 to 12 weeks ongoing. And post-COVID-19 syndrome, signs and symptoms that develop during or after an infection consistent with COVID-19, continue for more than 12 weeks and are not explained by an alternative diagnosis. These are pretty reasonable definitions. The most common are fatigue, cough, and headache. Since I got COVID in July, so I'm well beyond 12 weeks. I'm doing fine now. I don't have any, but I did have some post 12 weeks, or actually at least within 12 weeks. And I can share that a little bit more with you. Now, what they are saying is the likelihood of developing ongoing symptomatic COVID-19, the second guy, or post-COVID-19, the third guy, is not thought to be linked to the severity of acute COVID-19, including whether they were in the hospital. So just because you had more acute infection or more severe infection doesn't mean that you're more likely to get these two syndromes. So the definitions I thought were good, interesting, beginning to make some sense of it. According to, again, this is the ONS, the Office of National Statistics, UK. They estimate that 9.9% of the people who had COVID-19 remained symptomatic after 12 weeks. So about 10% people, according to the data that we know so far. And again, these are all very recent. This is 16th December. Because remember, the world has had experience for less than a year with this. So that's what we know so far. Commonish symptoms, that's why I didn't go over the previous slide. There's a lot of overlap. This is what they're saying. Respiratory, shortness of breath, cough, chest tightness, pain, palpitations. I had palpitations, by the way, just so you know, before the guidelines came. They're all gone. No prior cardiac history, but I was tough. I said, I'll let them go. Fatigue, fever, pain, tinnitus, sore throat, earache, cognitive impairment, brain fog, which I still have. No, I'm just joking, Headache, sleep disturbance, peripheral neuropathy, dizziness, depression, anxiety, abdominal pain, loss of appetite, skin rashes. So in other words, a whole lot of symptoms that we are not so sure what to do about yet. The guidelines themselves, I'm sure you either have read or have access to them. They say investigate based on dominant symptoms, self-explanatory. If somebody is having shortness of breath, do a chest x-ray, do pulmonary function test. If they are having cardiac issues, you can do BNP, you can do an echocardiogram. Management, just taking a couple of bullets, self-management and supported self-management still is what they need. And they are advising multidisciplinary integrated rehab, occupational therapy, physiotherapy, clinical psychology and psychiatry, and rehab medicine, put them all together because you just saw the symptoms. In the self-management, I think general graduated exercising, the incentive spirometry. I did a whole bunch of pranayam to the extent I could, which I think was extremely helpful personally for me. I do them a little bit now, but nonetheless, I think pranayam, if done right, if you know how to do it, it's perhaps even better than the incentive spirometry, just if you look at the physiology of it. So I'm a huge fan of that. Emerging information. This is the slide. It came out on December 23rd, so fairly new. And it talks a lot about the questions that we discussed. Okay. So antibody status and incidence of SARS-CoV-2 infection in healthcare workers. I just took the conclusion. You guys can get the abstract from NEJM. The presence of anti-spike of anti-nucleocapsid IgG antibodies was associated with a substantially reduced risk in the ensuing 6 months. So now they are saying the protection probably lasts 6 months, and the naturally acquired SARS-CoV-2 antibodies probably give you protection for 6 months. I mean, if it's healthcare workers, it's perhaps other people too. Maybe they have more incidental exposure. Remember, I said, I don't know what to make of that then. We just said 3 months. Now we are saying 6 months. Now we are saying antibodies do offer protection. So, as I said, I'm sharing the literature. I think that just tells me there is uncertainty around it. And again, happy to share the slides, or you can get the abstract from the web. Okay, lastly, I survived COVID, as I mentioned to you. I got it in July. I share some funny pictures with you. This is me. This is actually in my office. I had COVID. I recovered for about 10 days at my home. I rested, etc. I said, I'm going to start going. And in a day, I felt I was not able to speak in full sentences. I was just speaking, but I had to pause, which is not my natural. I had some exercise desaturation. Baseline O2 set was good. So I put myself on oxygen. I refused to be hospitalized. I was a llama patient, so to speak, and took home oxygen. And let's see what else I have put in. A lot of sun. So I'm sitting outside on my gallery looking pretty, chill. I don't know what is going on there. So a lot of sun, a lot of exercise. This is the park next to my home. So I did a lot of exercise. And you see the earphones. So I did all the 18 chapters of Gita on YouTube, just so you know. So that was my cognitive exercising. And as far as the treatment, this is actually a picture of my dining table where I'm sitting now. So on this side, I got dexamethasone. I took 6 milligrams a day for 10 days. My D-dimers were normal, but at that time, my CT scan was normal. But at that time, they do some Eliquis anyway. That's the oral anticoagulant, just in case, because of the exercise desaturation. This is my ashwagandha, giloy, tulsi, vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, and multivitamins, and Chyawanprash. What helped me, I have no idea, but I did all of that. As I said, this is the real table. This is where I'm sitting right now as we speak. I had my food plate here too, but I chopped that off because I cook. I'm a terrible, terrible cook. So I didn't want you all to lose the appetite. So as I mentioned, I had palpitations, interestingly, only rarely, but no big deal. My exercise tolerance was definitely, it took at least 12 weeks for it to come back. I started to play tennis a little too early. I was in miserable shape. I had incredible muscle weakness and fatigue. I'm a very active person. I play tennis. I go to the gym. I can do whatever I can run. I can bike. But the amount of, as I said, I started to play prematurely about 8 weeks into it. And I was out for the whole week. Saturday, Sunday, I couldn't get out of the bed. The muscle fatigue was incredible. So this is all real. As I said, I can tell you based on my experience. So I said, I'm going to take it easy. I gave myself some more time, physical rest, mental rest. And I can say personally, I'm back to slightly better than my baseline because of that much, graduated physical exercises and being more methodical about it. I can go on treadmill for 40 minutes. I give myself a stress test, 4 or 5 days a week with no shortness of breath, no chest pain, no palpitations. And again, no myalgias, arthralgias, or none of that. But for me, the fatigue and muscle pain perhaps was extremely significant. And I often joke, I still feel I have a loss of taste, but I think that's more my cooking than real loss of taste. So that's where I am. So there, and that's my contact information. Let's see if we have any more questions. Were you asymptomatic COVID? No, I think I was symptomatic. If you don't mind, what was your experience tackling Corona? Any special precautions you need to take? Any tests you have to do? I did get, so I did serial inflammatory markers, you know, your D-dimers and all the usual stuff that we are supposed to do. I did get my antibody status tested. I don't know what to do with it, but I'm positive. But I continue to take absolutely full precautions, which is your mask, your hand washing, social distancing. Try not to go to restaurants and stuff like that. But, you know, I mean, it's everywhere. So that's my personal experience. And let me stop there.
One small question. How many days you were off work?
So I remember I got fever and loss of taste and muscle ache and headache. I had no respiratory symptoms at that time. Tested PCR positive, and I rested for 10 days, right?
Okay.
So I was obviously symptoms, CDC guidelines, symptoms improving, etc. And then I went back to work, and second day I felt that, remember I told you I felt I was not, as I speak fluently, leadership roles are all about talking. And I felt in meetings, I was a little bit, after every sentence, I was taking a pause. So I noticed exercise desaturation, and then I was home at another 10 days.
So 20 days in total.
Yeah, but in kind of in
Broken.
chunks. Yeah.
Okay.
So, this was a first-hand experience by you, ma'am, and we are very thankful for giving us the this first-hand experience of a COVID survivor. And as a doctor, you have your experience and your expertise regarding this COVID vaccination, which you have already given. I would like to have few questions, ma'am, regarding this COVID, post-COVID syndrome. Can you just give us some more reasons or the causes why this long COVID occurs? Is it because of the reduction in the cytotoxic T cells, or because of the viral debris, or because of the organ damage, which takes long time for recovery, or is it because of the immune dysregulation, or a combination of all the four?
So all of the above. You already mentioned, if you again look at either the NICE guidelines or look at the CDC, that talk about NICE guidelines just came out, all of the above. And we don't know exactly which one of that is which. So maybe some ongoing viral debris, some site, we don't know if it is immunity reduction. You know, we don't know that. But my sense is perhaps it's more of the sustained inflammatory response. And, you know, the sustained, again, inflammatory response to the virus. That's my guess. Because if you look at so many organ systems involved, I mean, some of them are going to be totally out of the whack. You know, like somebody got severe pulmonary fibrosis and nothing else. But just the range of symptoms, and especially this fatigue, arthralgia, intermittent fever, that just tells me it's more of a immunogenic response to the virus. I mean, that's perhaps what it is. But we know that, right? None of this is, what is multiple sclerosis? Probably that's what it is. What's GB syndrome? Probably that's what it is. What is chronic fatigue syndrome? Probably that's what it is. We know that already, right? So many things that are these sustained. We even know that probably good old simple atherosclerotic coronary artery disease is probably significant. There is probably significant component of inflammation in there. So just, and now I'm going way out of science here. That's why I took all these giloys and ashwagandha and all of that. I think, so dexamethasone for 10 days isn't gonna do much for us, right? I mean, we know that once I go off dexamethasone, it's of no good. It was good for me in the acute phase. the anti-inflammatory combination, whether it is diet, whether it is your herbs, and I don't know what the right dose of any of these herbs is or should be, but the more, I mean, I'm a huge there, and there's plenty of literature about haldi. There's plenty of literature about ginger, adrak. There's plenty of literature about black pepper being anti-inflammatory. I feel there is some merit to that. That in general, a good anti-inflammatory diet and herbal supplements and lifestyle is going to protect us. That's, as I said, I'm going beyond science, but we are also experienced doctors and we have our observations. So this is more of an observation for me. That a strong anti-inflammatory regimen of good exercise, good diet, herbs is going to be helpful for combating post-acute as well, actually.
Right. And if someone is still symptomatic and having all these symptoms of a post-COVID syndrome, then how frequently they have to go for a inflammatory marker test? Like what should be the frequency for that?
Actually, there is no role for inflammatory marker, generic inflammatory marker testing. So what do I mean by that? So what do we, right? We are all doing LDH, we are all doing D-dimers, we are all doing all of the inflammatory markers in the acute stage, procalcitonin, etc., what have you. In the post-COVID, based on what we know, there is no role for acute inflammatory markers because either they will be non-specifically raised, just like we know the ESR of the yesteryear. It's the current practice as well as guidelines are more toward focus on the symptom that they have. So if they are more short of breath and they are more respiratory symptoms, then you go predominantly with chest X-ray, PFT, graduated exercise, do the pulmonary rehab. If it's more myocardial, then you might want to do the serial echoes or BNPs, and if they are in heart failure. Again, if it's a more renal, but there is no generic anti-inflammatory, following C-reactive protein or LDH or procalcitonin doesn't seem to be of any value.
So we need to.
I wouldn't do it for myself or anyone.
We need to investigate organ specific or organ system specific.
Exactly. Whatever is pointing you more toward the symptoms. What are you going to do? But the question is going to be fatigue, right? What organ symptom am I going to look at? I don't know. So I will ask them to do better exercising and pranayam and good air and sun. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we don't have anything more than that.
So you have already covered this investigation protocol, dietary approach, and the exercise protocol for a post-COVID syndrome.
Exactly.
Regarding COVID thrombosis, if you can throw some light to post-COVID thrombosis, because many people, they are afraid of still after many weeks of recovery, they still are afraid of getting some thrombotic episode. So how should they go about this?
I mean, based on what I have learned, let me just again flash the slides for you. Okay, so these are post-acute COVID-19 syndrome, all from CDC and all the other US literature, JAMA, etc., right? Fatigue, dyspnea, cough, arthralgia, chest pain, most commonly reported. Other reported long-term, cognitive impairment, depression, muscle pain, headache, intermittent fever, palpitations. And then more serious long-term complications, right? Cardiovascular, myocardial inflammation, ventricular dysfunction, pulmonary function, acute injury, rash, alopecia, neurological depression, anxiety, etc. And then NICE categorize them into this thing, right? So what I'm saying is then, oh, sorry, I didn't share the screen. Never mind, you all read this. From what I know, okay, I haven't come across an ongoing COVID-related post-thrombosis, right? But we also know there is a certain amount of baseline, thrombosis prevalence, Does the ongoing COVID inflammation cause an increased thrombogenicity? I haven't come across that. But if you have, please share. I mean, as I said, I want to learn from you. If you have come across a report or case study, please share.
Okay. Then So we have already covered that we need to have a rational multi-specialty approach to treat long haulers, and
Yes.
as per the presenting symptoms rather than just focusing mainly on the anti-inflammatory. So now I keep the floor open for our panelists. If they have any specific questions, they can just raise their hands and put on their videos, and they can. Yes, Dr. Rajgopal sir.
Ava, I'm not sure if I missed you talking about the use of vitamin D in this
Yeah.
entire episode.
So I didn't go into the therapeutics, because
Okay.
the topic was more of vaccination post-COVID. So vitamin D is being recommended by everyone. I think there was one study that says that vitamin D deficiency, I didn't put the citation because I was not doing the therapeutics,
Yeah.
but the vitamin D deficiency was clearly linked to COVID, acquisition of COVID and more severe COVID. So right now, vitamin D is pretty much a standard part of regimen. I would, so here is the challenge. I took it, I still take it, just so
Yeah.
you know, personally. Now, if I'm seeing, if this is where my hands get tied in US, if I'm seeing a patient in practice, I cannot, with the level of confidence I'm sharing with you, and say, I'm prescribing to you vitamin D because I don't have an approved guideline.
Yeah.
And, we are very accountable to, what is the evidence based on which I can share with the patient. You might want to take some, this is how I will say
Yeah.
this softly. You might want to take some vitamin D. Personally, I took it. If I have a family member, I'll give it to everybody
Thank you.
in moderate doses, not that 60,000 K per week.
Yeah.
I think I have like the 1200 unit or 2000 units. So it's my vitamin bottle. I can show you. That's the recommendation that I take.
Yeah, actually, we prescribe it almost once a month. Yeah, if it's going to be
Is
a
that right?
slightly higher dose. Yeah.
Okay.
Because even in India, for instance, people don't go out into the sun because the sun is very harsh. And that's one reason. And most of us, for instance, working from home for this entire period, everyone in the offices and all.
Perhaps
You
more
hardly
vitamin
get-
deficiency, right?
So we do have it
Actually,
here.
what I noticed is we have much more fortification of food here, especially let's say milk. I like dairy. So flour, the simple, roti flour, if I buy here, there's a lot more fortification which you don't have in India. So I have noticed that there may be more, even in spite of the sun, you are more likely to get vitamin D deficiency in India for that reason, maybe.
Possible, yeah. And in fact, we advise people that even if you keep your window slightly open, that also is enough for diffuse sunlight to come in. It's not enough for it to come through the glasses. So there are various theories about how do you actually get vitamin D.
That's right. I don't know either. So right now it's so cold. I have plenty of sun coming in, but all through the glass, I have no idea.
So
if I'm
through the
getting
glass,
it.
it's presumed to be not effective.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Dr. S.P. Chaudhary. Dr. Chaudhary he has just recovered from COVID. If you have any question, Dr. Chaudhary, he is our treasurer from Delhi branch of IUH.
It was a very encouraging and promising presentation by Dr. Abha Agrawal. And then during the whole presentation, both the theory as well as practical was also taken care of. And just 4 days back, I was declared fit for duty by authorities. I also had COVID, and luckily I didn't have much symptoms, except I started with the cough and cold. And as seasonal cough cold goes on, so I thought it is a seasonal only. But in my office, many people had COVID, so as a precaution, I was directed to get a COVID test done, and it was positive. But there was no fever. But on fourth day, I had conjunctivitis in one eye first, and after 4 days in second eye also. And in our setup, we have a different this thing protocol. So I was advised vitamin D sachet for 3 days with milk, then 5-day course of ivermectin, 12 milligram for 5 days, then Ginkgovit, which having this thing, and rest of this Montair and Crossin SOS was prescribed, and there was to be a close watch on the oxygen saturation by pulse oximeter and thermometer for temperature. And luckily, my 2 other family members were also positive and they were asymptomatic. So we all got segregated in all 4 rooms, thinking that there is no use mixing because viral load may have a part on recovery. And regarding Dr. Abha's that taking herbs or turmeric, giloy and everything, I'm having a course in from Ministry of Ayush in yoga and Ayurveda. So as my curiosity, I took it 12 years back, and there are a lot of items which ultimately the origin of all the medicines is from the plants only. As later on, they were synthetically start manufacturing, and so the origin belongs to the herbs only. And by God's grace, I'm okay. I have returned back, not having much post-COVID weakness or any other symptom, except off and on dry cough, and rest is asymptomatic, not exactly anything. So in my opinion, it is an unpredictable syndrome. No one can surely say that how it will present in people. And there are people which are collapsed without any symptoms, not even giving chance to rehabilitate or resuscitate. So you never know how it can present in you, and what symptoms will occur to you, what precautions. In my opinion, the treatment is totally symptom based. There is no treatment for this COVID. So a person may show more symptoms, more concentrated to a particular organ. They may be respiratory, they may be cardiac, they may be more psychosomatic. But no doubt it is having a lot of impact on your conscious level. The people are depressed, it gives very low feelings, and it really makes you worry. So this is all what I faced and what I feel.
Thanks, Dr. Chaudhary, for your sharing your experience. Dr. Rajiv Kumar Jain, our Vice President, Senior Vice President from Delhi. Dr. Rajiv, he also recovered from COVID some few weeks back. In short, sir, if you want to say something, sir.
Yeah, Dr. Abha, good morning to you. You must be having finished your breakfast, I believe, or didn't have your breakfast. So it was really enlightening to hear your personal experience, how you are managing the vaccine. I think in India, we are in the process, and these learnings are important. Vaccine administration is, if done properly, it will create a landscape for adult vaccination in the long term. That's what I believe. This is an entry point for organizations to start adult vaccination. India has been very poor. Like in India, we hardly have flu vaccination, unlike in US. The issue which I wanted to highlight was the effect of environment. Our AQI in Delhi is 370 and 450. Yeah. And you in Chicago have an AQI of say 35 or 40. So the difference between these two determines the behavior of individuals. The pulmonologists all across in Delhi, they're advising against doing outdoor exercises, leave aside walking, even with or without masks, no cycling, no tennis, no badminton, because they believe the AQI is going to affect, because even with N95, we are not protected against PM 2.5. We have very high PM 2.5 in Delhi, Noida, or Gurgaon. In fact, Noida is #1 in the world today. If you see the AQI index amongst all the cities in the world, Noida is #1, Delhi is #2 at the current juncture in the world. And your city is appearing in the top 5 in terms of best AQI. So the treatment modality or the management modality, would it not vary from place to place? Because environment, because we were hearing Dr. Somenathan earlier, and she has been advocating that the reason why COVID has come up is the human environment interface has been imbalanced now. And in that context, I would like to apprise you that All India Institute of Medical Sciences in Delhi has initiated a Department of Integrative Medicine, and All India Institute of Ayurveda and All India Institute of Medical Sciences in New Delhi are jointly initiating a huge research project along with WHO for actually doing trials and gathering evidence. With like you were, I was really enamored to see a whole lot of Ayurvedic immune boosters on your dining table. This is actually going to happen in India in a big way in the days and months to come, because this is going to remain. The question which I have for you, besides already answered, is post-COVID entity is a distinct entity, or is it still in the evolutionary phase? Because I find different interpretation to the post-COVID syndrome across literature all across. And India, we have very little consensus as to what is actually a post-COVID syndrome. Unless we have clear definition, how would we define, how would we manage, and how would we conduct trials to manage post-COVID syndrome? Thank you so much for this outstanding personal experience that you have shared with us.
Thank you, Dr. Rajiv. I mean, you're absolutely right. Great remarks about environment. I mean, and I'm so glad that this Ayurveda research is going on. I think to your specific point about the post-COVID, I tend to think it's very diffuse and vague right now. I don't think there is a distinct entity like a post-COVID syndrome quite yet. And it may not be, I mean, it may just end up being, like one of those chronic fatigue syndromes, all kinds of distinct symptoms with a huge mix of, psychosomatic component. That's why I think if I were to do a post-COVID clinic right now, right? University of Chicago has started, my hospital hasn't. We are just seeing them as regular people. I would do a clinic. I'm an internal medicine trained doctor, board certified internal medicine and informatics. I'll evaluate all their symptoms, and I will do just like I will do any patient, just make sure they have enough psychosocial support, and the definition of which varies a lot between country and country. So I agree with you on all points. Especially the integrative medicine, we have no therapeutics. We didn't touch on that. We know dexamethasone, we know remdesivir, we know plasma, we know monoclonal antibodies. Today in favor, tomorrow out of favor. So I think Dr. Chaudhary mentioned there is no treatment, and he's right. And so I think integrative medicine will hopefully give us some better answers. And I am looking forward. I'm a huge fan personally, in my own personal experience of using, all the Indian spices and saffron and all of that, trying to keep a good diet.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Tyagraj, sir. Dr. Tyagraj is our senior member from, he's from Hyderabad.
I'm from Bangalore.
Bangalore. He's from Bangalore.
He's from San Francisco. His background is in San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Very nicely explained, madam, with great observation, and it is really a systematically roadmap to all of us. Your vast knowledge regarding all the specialties like medicine, nephrology, cardiology, and all is tremendous, and is knowledgeable and very easy to understand. Madam, I am observing these things right from 2019 December, where Dr. Anthony Fauci used to give his this one. He's always used to tell, identify the virus, isolate it, contact tracing, and people put them in quarantine, and all the transport to be stopped and lockdown to be essential. But in spite of that, why America is a number one? And countries like South Korea, Japan, they are all doing very best. But America, where we are learning a lot from America, vaccines, everything from America, knowledge from America, but medicines are coming from America. But in spite of that, America is the number one, and it is going like a super fly, very vastly it is going, nobody can catch them. What is the reason, madam?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. I think there are scientific answers to this, and there are political answers to this, and there are personal answers to this. But you are absolutely right. I mean, we are getting perhaps one of the highest cases these days, close to 180, 200,000 cases a day, close to 3,000 deaths a day, 2,500, 3,000 deaths a day, which is not even in the first wave. We are fully in the middle of the second wave, if you will. I think some of it is, socio-political, the observance of masks, the observance of large gatherings, the idea that my body, my choice, I have the freedom not to be in a lockdown, not to do what I need to do, and so on and so forth. So quite a bit of it is there. Quite a bit of it is also economic. I was actually in India during lockdown in the first part. I flew back here in June, and I was doing a lot of telemedicine consultations. I did more telemedicine consultations in April than I ever did. And the factories were open, and the workers were open, and the buses were running. And here I was in India, totally in lockdown with no activity whatsoever. And I'm talking to US patients, and I'm like, what the heck is going on in that country? So the level of shutdown we think we had, I don't know right now, but I personally experienced when the Prime Minister announced on March 21st, the level and intensity and severity of the lockdown was never in place here, could never be in place in US. Just people are psychosocially not capable of observing that. That's number two. Number three, it is true that we do a lot more testing. I mean, we just do community testing. Right now, we have been many centers, including our hospital. It's drive-through. You don't need a doctor's order, and it's free. The governor's office gave us all the kits. Okay, so anyone can come in. We have tents. Even in this extremely frigid weather, we have heated tents. You just get into your car, your cars line up. We do 200-300 tests a day in a couple of hours. Cars line up, our staff is there doing the nasopharyngeal swab. So we do a lot more testing. I want to say this to you again. There are reports and all of that, but we do extreme under testing in India. I have two brothers, both of them live in India. The one lives in Agra, the other lives in Delhi. This I'm sharing with you. They got mild symptoms, and both of them had the same thing. My brother in Delhi, he lives in a building, those multi-storied building. So I said, "Theek hai, maine kaha test kara le." And he said, "Okay, what will you do if I have positive?" I said, "You can take, azithromycin, etc., vitamin D, zinc, and all of it." He said, "I'll take them anyway. Why do you want me to get tested? The whole building will have my name, the whole thing. It's going to be a big deal. I don't want to get tested." My own brother, all right? You write to me what I would do if I'm positive. I will do them anyway. I don't want to get tested. Exactly the same, my second brother. I imagine there are millions of people like my two brothers who will do that. I mean, this is my own family. So I think we also, the numbers are very, they should be interpreted that, like Dr. Rajiv said, in the country specific environmental context as to what those numbers are. And the political answer to that is, I mean, we had a president who would absolutely, very proudly, very publicly flaunt the public health measures, including wearing of the mask, including observing social distance. And that matters to us, as opposed to, I think most public leaders in India have been very good about giving a positive message about public health measures. So at any rate, some of it is largely is a mystery to me too.
You have explained the numbers, but what about the deaths? Why the deaths are so high in US?
Yeah, I don't know really. I mean, I think also, I mean, even in the deaths, I know there are a lot of people who don't want the corona death. I mean, and again, I don't want this to be the only explanation. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, maybe we have a lot of technology, but maybe we don't have enough, there were a lot of explanations. Does the BCG vaccine protect it? I think, Dr. Rajiv, you mentioned the integrative medicine. I don't know, maybe there is something in the Indian diet that protects us. Maybe we have better anti-inflammatory systems in our body as a general population, that in a largely non-vegetarian, largely non-anti-inflammatory diet in US, they don't have, maybe. It's quite possible. Many of my friends got it. And I strongly advise them, please do not start to have a glass of wine with your meal every day, not for 12 weeks. No, it's okay. Alcohol is not going to do anything bad to me. It's the social, and they are not drinkers. They are doctors, they are leaders. A glass of wine isn't going to harm. I think it is going to harm. It's going to suppress your immunity. It might, exacerbate the cognitive impairment. Why do any CNS depression when your system is down? So again, I'm now going into the non-database, non-scientific territory. I have a feeling that maybe in India, we have an advantage because of that, our baseline system of just diet and lifestyle have a disadvantage because of the AQI that Dr. Rajiv mentioned.
Madam, more of democracy means more of indiscipline. In fact,
absolutely, and we are very democratic.
Yes. And they never followed the instructions.
So
Yeah.
Everybody was free in the US, and they were doing, spending their picnics, their gatherings, everything they were doing.
Everything. We are still going to restaurants. That is true. I mean, that's what it is.
Abha, we would take few more questions from our senior panelists. Dr. Shiva is our past president from Mumbai.
Hello,
Dr.
sir.
Shiva, if you want any question or comments.
Yeah. First of all, Dr. Abha, excellent presentation, because you have given your experience and made us all knowledgeable.
Thank you, sir.
Number two, one of the reasons why the infection levels in US is higher than in India could be, it is my personal view, is that Indians are more exposed to infections.
Yeah.
So their resistance power is much better than others. So that is why they may be protected. And in US, the lockdown was not followed at all, which you did mention. And second thing which I wanted to tell you is that it is very difficult for Pfizer vaccine to come to India because of maintaining the cold chain. To maintain minus 80 degrees with such a huge population, it would be not only difficult, but also very, very, very expensive. So this is what I wanted to share. Thank you very much for giving us such a first-hand information on giving vaccination. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you. And
Shiva.
thank you for the comment.
Yeah, Dr. Shanbag, sir. Dr. Shanbag, he is our past president and he's from Mumbai. Yeah, Doctor.
Good morning, Dr. Abha. Excellent. Very, very practical, very interactive. very knowledge. You have given us a lot of knowledge in your presentation. I have one or two small queries. One, you mentioned in your presentation that once you get COVID infection, the immunity lasts for 6 months. Could you comment on few cases, at least in India, I don't know about the US, where there was repeat infections in some healthcare workers
Yeah.
within 6 weeks, 8 weeks? Would you comment on that?
I think there has not been any reported. There are only a handful reported
Yes,
of
only a handful,
reinfections.
but
Not in healthcare though.
no.
I haven't seen.
In India, there are a few doctors who got it second time.
Oh, okay. Okay. I think again, it's so new. We don't know. I mean, and I didn't know that in India, people are getting
A few doctors,
reinfections.
one or two cases were reported in India.
We are learning about this disease, frankly.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, excellent presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other question from the panelists? They can unmute and they can put, yeah. Dr. Bobby Joseph.
No, Dr. Sandeep, no questions at all. Like I mentioned in the chat box, wonderful presentation, straight from the heart. Thank you very much, Dr. Abha.
Dr. Shyam Pingle is our past president, and he is also member of ICO board member, International Commission on Occupational Health. Dr. Pingle, sir, if you have any questions or queries, sir.
No questions, no queries. It was an excellent presentation, excellent discussion. And I really appreciate that Dr. Abha spent more time in discussing equally as a presentation. So thank you so much.
Dr. Shashikala, ma'am.
Good morning, Dr. Abha. Wonderful presentation. It was a pleasure listening to your wonderful lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Ashish, our Vice President from Delhi, if you have any question, or yeah.
I just want to compliment her for a presentation which felt right from the heart. She was very open, and I think it was great to hear her mind continuously. Thanks.
Dr. Shriniket, he is working in Hero MotoCorp. He is Chief Medical Officer over there, and very active member. Dr. Shriniket. So anyway, Dr. Abha madam, this was a great talk, great personal experience sharing. And we as Dr. Rajgopal sir, you have any query or question or?
Not really. Like everyone says that, this has been a very fascinating interaction, if I may actually add, and very, very interactive. And thank you for sparing your time. It must be quite early there and being with us this morning.
So, पापा ने अच्छी ट्रेनिंग की थी बचपन में.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Dr. Abha, this was a great learning experience for every one of us. As everyone has told that this was a first-hand experience about the COVID vaccination, Pfizer vaccination especially, which you are well versed with, and about the post-COVID syndrome also. And in some session, we will learn about this, your post-COVID recovery program, which you are running through this A4 clinics. That also we will would like to know about it. From your talk and from the interaction, we came to know that we are not going out of this COVID situation quickly. And it's going to take some time. And vaccine itself will not be a silver bullet. And that can't be a single solution for this particular problem. And we have to maintain all the COVID appropriate behaviors, especially the social gatherings and especially preventing the transmission of this particular virus. So that will be of great help in addition to the vaccine. So we don't have to, there are many refusals even for the vaccines also, as you have mentioned. So as industrial doctors, and since we are working in many organizations, I am working especially in Indian Oil Corporation. If we focus on health, hygiene, and as Dr. Rajiv said, on the environment also, we can definitely win over this pandemic, and we all need to be an amazing voice for credibility, especially in our industries. And with learning from you, you all experienced people across the globe, we would like to learn much more about this particular COVID first-hand experiences. So the road ahead is not easy, but as we have done in the previous crisis also, we know that we will get out of this pandemic if we are all unitedly doing all the needful. So let us all put all this learning from Dr. Abha into action to overcome this current situation and follow all the appropriate norms which are already we know about them. So vaccine is a great solution for 2021. In addition to that, we don't have to, like she said, post-COVID syndrome, still we are not so much clear, but that entity is definitely there because of the post-inflammatory phase of this COVID. So we should try to get COVID detected early, treated early, so that the inflammatory response, it remains minimal, and we get out of this COVID as like a normal cold and cough. As you rightly mentioned, many people are now, they are not getting tested, and they are just taking azithromycin, ivermectin, or whatever treatment protocol they are taking.
Right.
And in India, especially, ma'am, everyone is now after this Ayurvedic kala and exercises and walking and all these things. So we hope in 2021 we will get away with this COVID, with all these protocols and COVID vaccine and care of the post-COVID syndrome as the things clearly comes in front of us. And especially as you have mentioned that we have to go as per the symptoms, as per the organ involved, or as per the organ system involved. That is more important rather than creating a separate entity as post-COVID syndrome. So that is very important. And before we conclude, we have designed a small certificate for you, ma'am, which will send you electronically, because
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you.
we will send it to you. And as I have told you, we are all from preventive health people. We are all, despite in industries, we are practicing curative medicine also. And we as industrial doctors, we have learned a lot from you regarding prevention, and we'll try to propagate all these learnings. And for your information, we have been conducting these sort of interactive webinars every week by different branches also. So from Delhi, we have conducted about 39. This is the 39th issue. And we would also like to invite you for our next webinar, which will be by a motivational speaker, so that we come out of this negative mindset of COVID-19 and start the new year with a positive mindset. So he will be Dr. Pawan Kumar Dabbawala. He is a motivational speaker. Our recording for that and today's recording also, that will be available on our DigiConnect webinar series YouTube channel also. So we would definitely like to have more sessions with you to learn more first-hand experience from you. And you being my senior from my college, I thank you very much, and I appreciate sparing your time for our association especially, and for we all senior doctors from Indian Association of Occupation Health. Thank you, madam. Thank you very much, and have a great day, ma'am.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, and I really learned a lot. And thank you, everyone, for sparing the time.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.